I never thought the man who taught me how to ride a bike, who used to carry me on his shoulders when I was little, would one day trade me away like I was nothing more than an object. But that's exactly what happened. My name is Emily. I was 17 when my life changed forever. And this is the story of how my own father sold me. At first, I didn't notice the signs. My father had always struggled with money. He worked odd jobs, gambled more than he should, and often disappeared for days. When he came back, he always had excuses, stories about bad luck, people cheating him, or debts he had to repay. My mother had left years before, so it was just me and him in a run-down house at the edge of town. I didn't know the full extent of his struggles, but I could sense the tension in the air, the constant fear that something bad was about to happen. One evening, I came home from school and found him sitting at the table, his head buried in his hands. A half-empty bottle of whiskey stood next to him, and the air smelled heavy with smoke. He looked up at me with eyes that weren't just tired. They were desperate. "Emily," he said quietly, "we need to talk." Those words carried a weight I didn't yet understand. I thought maybe he was finally ready to change, to get help, to admit that things had gone too far. But instead, he told me something that froze my blood. I owe people money, a lot of money, and they want it back. His voice cracked, and he took another sip before continuing. "I don't have it. But they offered me a way out." I frowned, confused. "What do you mean?" His gaze didn't meet mine. "They all forgive the debt if I let you go with them." At first, I laughed nervously, thinking he was joking in some sick way. But when he finally looked at me, I saw no trace of humor in his face. Just shame and resignation. "You can't be serious," I whispered, my voice trembling. "You're talking about selling me? I'm your daughter." He slammed his fist on the table, making me jump. "You think I want this? You think I have a choice?" His words rang out, but his eyes betrayed him. He wasn't angry at me. He was angry at himself. Yet he was still willing to go through with it. That night, I barely slept. My room felt like a prison cell. I kept waiting for footsteps, for the knock on my door that would mean it was time. I thought about running, but I had nowhere to go. No friends who could hide me, no relatives to turn to. I was trapped. The next day, 2 men showed up. They wore dark suits, their faces sharp and cold. One of them smiled when he saw me, and I'll never forget the way it made my skin crawl. My father avoided my eyes as he exchanged a few words with them, then motioned for me to follow. "Dad, please, don't do this." But he turned away. They took me to a black car parked outside. I remember the sound of the door slamming shut behind me, the way the world outside blurred as the car drove off. My heart pounded so loudly I thought it might burst. In that moment, my childhood ended. I wasn't Emily, the girl who liked painting and dreamed of going to college. I was a commodity, a debt payment. The men drove me for hours, saying nothing. When we finally stopped, it was at an old farmhouse, isolated in the middle of nowhere. They led me inside where other girls sat silently, their faces pale, their eyes hollow. My stomach turned. This was real. This was happening. I wanted to scream, to fight, but fear pinned me to the floor. One of the men handed me a phone and said, "Say goodbye." I held the phone to my ear, expecting to hear my father's voice one last time. But all I heard was silence. He wasn't even on the line. That's when I realized he didn't just sell me. He erased me. They took the phone away, and locked me in a small upstairs room with 2 narrow windows that didn't open and a metal bolt on the outside of the door. There was a thin mattress on the floor, a chip dresser with no drawers, and a camera in the top corner with a blinking red light. It wasn't a bedroom. It was a holding pen. A woman brought food: oatmeal, a jug of water, an apple bruised to brown on one side. She wore a floral blouse and a chain with a small gold cross. She smiled without showing her teeth. "You can call me Mara," she said. "Follow the rules and you won't get hurt." "What rules?" I asked. "Quiet. Obedience. No crying at night." She tilted her head, studying me the way a librarian studies a noisy kid. "People downstairs work late. We don't wake them." Her voice was gentle enough to make me hate it. I wanted to throw the tray across the room. Instead, I nodded, because I had nothing but survival, and survival sometimes looks like agreement. Days bled together. They let us shower every other morning, 3 minutes each, the hot water a mercy that felt like a bribe. We wore plain gray clothes that never quite fit. There were other girls on the floor, 5 of us maybe, more I never saw. When they moved us between rooms, we kept our eyes down. Names were discouraged. So we treated glances that tried to be a lifeline and failed. On the 4th day, they took me downstairs. The hallway smelled like bleach and something sweet that made the back of my tongue go numb. A man with a clipboard waited at the bottom of the stairs. He had pale hair and a pleasant face that didn't match his eyes. "I'm Hale," he said, as if he were introducing himself at a neighborhood barbecue. "You'll be Iris." "My name is Emily," I said too fast. He leaned forward, not angry, just amused. "Not anymore." He flipped a page and clicked his pen. "Age, 17. 16, he corrected, writing it down. "Less paperwork." He made me stand against a wall and took a photo. Flash, a white explosion that made me see stars. Hale handed the camera to the man beside him. I glanced over his shoulder. On the wall behind them hung a corkboard crowded with index cards and a cheap calendar with a picture of a lighthouse. Red circles around certain dates, Post-it notes with initials, a black key fob dangling from a pushpin, faded logo of a trucking company I recognized from the highway near our town. It should have been nothing, that key fob, but something inside me filed it away like a clue. Back in the room, I found the first message. It was disguised as nothing. A scrap of cardboard tucked under the mattress, written in eyeliner, all a dozen words that changed the temperature of my blood. Window latch rusted. Hinge on back door loose. Generator cuts at 1:17 a.m. R. I read it twice. R, I whispered, afraid my mouth could betray me even to the camera. I pressed the cardboard to my chest like a prayer. Someone had been here before me. Someone who had tried to leave and wanted a stranger to have more than she did. That night I listened. The generator hummed through the walls like a heavy animal asleep in the basement. Around midnight, the noise faltered and returned. At exactly 1:17, it stuttered again, a 2-second shiver, like the house forgot to breathe. I stood beneath the camera's red eye and pretended to sleep. I counted. I learned the rhythm. On the 5th day, Mara escorted me to the washroom. Another girl stood at the sink, rubbing her arms as if her skin didn't fit. She had a small scar above her one eyebrow, like a crescent moon, and hair that looked self-cut, short in the back, longer in front. She stared at me in the mirror, then at the door, then at the ceiling camera, and her mouth barely moved. "You're new," she whispered. I flicked water on my face. "I'm Emily." Her eye flinched. "Not here," she hesitated, then added, "I'm Rena." The R blew through her nose like a secret. "You're in the corner room?" I nodded. "Don't cry at night," she said with a ghost of a smile. "That rule is real." "Did you?" I couldn't finish. She shook her head once, the tiniest movement. "Not yet."
Mara rapped her knuckles on the doorframe. "Time's up. Back to the gray rooms." I walked without looking back because I needed them to think I had learned to be obedient. The second message was under the radiator cover, taped with a strip of bandage. If the first had been hope, the second was a map. Backstairs, kitchen, mudroom, outer latch, sticks, need, thin metal, paper clip in laundry. I swallowed hard. Laundry meant downstairs. Downstairs meant Hale. The idea of taking anything from under his nose made bile rise in my throat. But the word paperclip lit up in my head like a held note. something you could bend, something that might pretend to be a key. That night, the house changed. I didn't know why. A car arrived late, tires crunching on gravel, voices in the hallway sharper than usual. I slipped to my window and pressed my forehead to the cool glass. Headlights crossed the yard, dragged their white fingers over the fence, then died. Footsteps, a door, silence swallowing everything. And then I heard him. His voice. My father's voice. He didn't speak long. A few sentences, a rough laugh, a word that was mine once. Kiddo. I bit my fists so I wouldn't make a sound. He was downstairs. He had come here, to this place where I was nothing but a number and a photo on a clipboard. For what? To make a payment? To see the damage? To make sure the men with the black car hadn't done anything to lose his investment? The next morning, I was summoned. Mara's smile was brighter than usual, almost maternal. She said, "A visitor." Hale waited in the office with a cup of coffee and a tiny porcelain creamer shaped like a cow. He nodded at me as if I were early to a dentist appointment. He said, "I want you to meet an old friend of ours. He came to check on the goods." My father stood behind him, hat in his hands like a man who had learned once to be polite and never learned anything else. He had shaved. He never shaved. His eyes found mine and skittered away. "Emily," he said, too loud, then flinched as if the name had cut him. Careful," Hale said softly. "Her name is Iris." My father nodded like a marionette whose strings were pulled by shaking hands. "Right, Iris." He licked his lips. "You look fine?" 100 practiced speeches dissolved on my tongue. I wanted to scream. I wanted to tell him my life was more than his debt. I wanted to ask him if he had ever loved me, or if love had always been a ledger to him. Instead, something else happened. Something small and inexplicable that didn't belong in this smooth, awful room. He dropped his hat. It rolled on the carpet and bumped my shoe. I reached down automatically. My fingers brushed the brim. It was heavier than a hat should be. There was a pin under the band. No, not a pin. A bent paperclip. When I looked up, he was watching Hale's face, not mine. His mouth didn't move, but the shape of it said a word he used to mouth across the room when I was scared of the dark and pretending not to be. Now. It made no sense. He had sold me. He had brought me here. He was here with Hale. Still, that small metal thing burned my palm like a coal. I slipped it up my sleeve. "Hale finished his coffee," he said to my father, as if discussing a box of winter coats. "Busy route. Won't even notice the extra stop." My father cleared his throat. "Good." The word cracked in two. He reached into his pocket and put a wad of bills on the desk. Hale didn't count them. The room smelled like old coffee and my childhood. Back upstairs, I didn't cry. I used the paperclip. The outer latch did stick. The metal was soft and stubborn. I worked it between my fingers until it learned a new shape. Then I slid it into the crack and listened with my whole body. The bolt shifted like a yawn. I held my breath. The camera in the corner blinked red, indifferent. The bolt eased. The door gave an inch. I froze when footsteps passed. Mara humming, keys jingling. The humming faded. I let air back into my chest. I moved at 1:16 a.m., timed to the generator's forgetting. Counting backwards from 60 kept my hands from shaking. At 1:17, the house held its breath. I opened the door. The hallway was a spine with doors for ribs. I stepped softly, toes first. At the far end, the back stairs, 2 turns down, concrete steps with a crack like a lightning branch, then the kitchen, where a night light painted the floor lemon yellow and left the counters in shadow. I slipped past the sink and paused in the mudroom, where the walls wore hooks like teeth. Coats, a mop, boots lined up like men who didn't make it home. The outer latch. The stick was real. The paperclip went in and the metal argued with me, then sighed and moved. I opened the door to the cold.
The sky was the color of old chalk, gravel underfoot. A dog barked once on the far side of the yard, then twice, closer. I recognized the shape that ran into view, ribs like a washboard, the white mutt that slept near the generator shack. The girls called him Ghost. "Hey," I whispered, kneeling. I held my hand out flat, as if offering him the whole future. "Good boy. Quiet." He sniffed. He whined. He didn't bark. I could have kissed his muddy head. I took 2 steps, then 3. Then someone opened a window upstairs, and a line of light cut the grass. I dove behind the generator shed and pressed my body to the cold metal. Voices. Male. Irritated. A cuss. A cough. The window shut. The light died. I didn't run. Not that night. I went back the way I came, closing everything quietly behind me, careful to leave no door that would announce my attempt at dawn. I slid into bed and watched the red light in the corner blink out 1 more hour. The next morning, I whispered to Rena in the washroom. "Backstairs, mudroom, the latch opens with a paperclip," I said, voice barely air. "There's a dog. He's friendly." Rena's eyes flashed like a match. "I know that dog. I didn't know the latch." "Tonight," I said. "If the generator," she finished for me, "it cuts at 1:17. How long have you—" She looked down. "Long enough." We didn't plan details, not because we didn't know how, but because planning is a luxury and hope makes noise. We agreed on one thing. If we went, we would take others. Even 2 more would be a revolution in a house convinced of our smallness. The third message wasn't written. It was an absence. Mara brought breakfast late, hands shaking. When she set the tray down, I saw her wrist. A purple bracelet of bruises, thumbprints like stamps. She met my eyes and for the first time looked human. Not a jailer, not a caregiver, a woman in a broken place. "Eat," she whispered. "They're in a mood." "Because of last night?" I asked before I could stop myself. She blinked. "What happened last night?" "Nothing," I said, but she had heard the capital letter. That afternoon, Hale took me to the office again. No father this time, just the cow creamer and the key fob, and a different man with a tablet who didn't bother with a name. Hale asked questions, as if we were playing a game. Favorite color? Allergies. Whether I could swim? "Why does that matter?" I asked. "In case of accidents," he said. His smile didn't reach his eyes. "We like to be prepared." I stared at the fob and thought of roads. Routes. Trucks that changed towns into exit signs. If he moved me, I would be gone in a new way, harder to trace, harder to undo. Tonight had to be the night. Rena and I pretended not to know each other at dinner. When the plates were collected, she scratched her elbow twice. It was the sign we had invented. Ready. At 1:14, I moved. At 1:16, the paperclip bent under my fingers one last time, like it had learned me and I had learned it. At 1:17, the house trembled, and we left. Rena slipped from her door like a shadow falling off a wall. Behind her, a tiny girl with a cough, Jessa, clutched a rolled-up photograph like a talisman. Another girl, taller, nervous, whose name I didn't know, hovered at the stairwell. 4 of us now. 4 was an army. We went down the back stairs, the steps remembering other feet, the kitchen bright with its fake moon. In the mudroom, the latch stuck, like it was trying to save us from ourselves. The paperclip argued, then yielded. The door opened, and the night sighed in. Ghost padded up and wagged his tail, an idiot metronome that could betray us. I stroked his head, felt the dirt and warmth of him, and he leaned into my leg like I belonged to him. We crossed the yard, sticking to the shadows cast by the fence, past the generator shed, and toward the field where the grass had learned not to grow. A voice behind us cracked the dark. "Stop." We froze. Mara stood in the doorway, hair unpinned, robe tight around her body as if it were holding her in. She looked at each of us, and I saw the fast math in her eyes. Girls outside, alarms, punishments, her own skin at stake. "Mara," I whispered, "please." She stepped out, shut the door behind her quietly, and walked toward us. "You'll freeze," she said, and draped her robe over Jess's shoulders. "Go." My heart skipped. "What?" "Go," she said again, sharper. "The cameras loop for 30 seconds when the generator stutters. I can buy you 10 more. Run to the tree line and follow the ditch west. There's a service road. Don't stop for headlights. They'll try to blind you." "Why are you—" She swallowed, and in that swallow, I saw a boy's face. Imagined it, maybe. A child with her eyes. "Because someone once opened a door for me, and I didn't go. I can't live with that again." I grabbed her hand. It was cold and soft. "Come with us." She shook her head. "I can slow them better from inside." The tree line became a promise. We ran. Ghost ran with us, legs flashing, tongue out like he was laughing at the night. Rena's breath rasped. Jessa coughed. The taller girl stumbled and caught herself, and I didn't look back because looking back is how you go back. The ditch felt like a path someone had dug for us decades ago. The service road was a gray ribbon, empty, colder than the yard. We turned west. The sky wanted to be morning someday, but not yet. We were 3 minutes out, maybe 4, when headlights washed the road white and burned our shadows into the field. "Off the road," I hissed, and we threw ourselves into the ditch, water gulping at our ankles. The vehicle slowed. A window rolled down. A voice we knew shouted a name we didn't want to answer to. "Iris! Iris!" I pressed my mouth into the muddy bank and tasted metal. Rena squeezed my hand so hard my bones sang. The car idled, moved, idled again. A beam of light swept the field and missed us by a small miracle. Then another set of headlights appeared, ahead, coming fast. The first car took off to meet it. We scrambled up the ditch and ran the other way. A yellow sign loomed out of the dark. Gas, 1 mile. Food, 1.5. Phone. The arrow pointed like an accusation. We ran toward the promise of witnesses. The gas station was a little island of fluorescence. A man behind thick glass reading a magazine, a coffee machine wheezing to itself. We burst through the door and the man jolted, his magazine sliding to the floor. He looked at us, at our gray clothes and wet legs and wild eyes. He looked at Ghost, who wagged at the snack aisle. "Help us," I said, voice shredding on the word. "Please, call the police." He picked up the phone. He dialed. He peered past me into the night. "You girls in some kind of trouble?" "Yes," I said. "Please." He spoke into the receiver, gave the address, and hung up. "They're nearby. Sit tight."
We didn't sit. We stood in a tight cluster by the coffee machine and tried to become one small thing. Ghost lay at our feet and sighed like a person. The clerk put a bottle of water on the counter and pushed it toward us, without looking like he had done a holy act. The first cruiser arrived in 4 minutes. I counted every second. Lights, blue and red, bright enough to make me dizzy. A uniformed officer got out, broad-shouldered, friendly face, eyes like winter. He scanned us and smiled in a way that wasn't about happiness. "Evening," he said mildly. "You must be the girls from the farm." The farm. Not a guess, not a question. The clerk frowned. "You know them?" The officer kept smiling. "We've had runaways before. Paperwork thing." He opened the back door of the cruiser. "Hop in. We'll get you home." Home. The word had never sounded more dangerous. Rena's hand found mine again and locked. The taller girl was shaking so hard her teeth chattered. Jessica coughed and stared at the floor. Can we call my mom?" I asked, stalling. "Just to tell her I'm okay?" "Soon as we get to the station," he said pleasantly. "Come on now." Behind him, at the edge of the lot, a sedan idled, familiar in a way that hit me like a smell. My father's car. He was here. Again. I didn't know if that meant rescue or betrayal or something more complicated. Before I could choose, a second cruiser roared in from the road and parked nose to nose with the first. A woman stepped out. Short hair, plain suit, badge flashed fast. Her presence moved the air differently. She took in the scene in one sweep.
Us, the clerk, the two friendly officer, the sedan. "Officer Daly," she said to the man, voice all gravel, "I'll take it from here." He stiffened. "I got it handled, detective." "I didn't ask if you had it handled," she said. She turned to us. "Girls, my name is Detective Sloan. You're safe." The first officer's smile thinned into a line. "They're assigned to my jurisdiction." Sloan didn't look at him. She looked at his cruiser, at the open back door, at the lack of dash cam, an empty rectangle on the windshield where there should have been an eye. Her mouth set. "No, they're not." She lifted her radio and spoke in a calm voice that made the hairs on my arms stand up. "Unit 7, bring the van and cuff Daly." He laughed. Then he didn't. Two more cruisers slid in like chess pieces, and everything became tight and loud. Daly's face changed, the friendly mask cracking to show the man behind it. He said a word not meant for our ears. He went for his belt, and 4 other hands went for his. Sloan herded us behind the counter, close enough to smell the coffee machine's burnt sugar breath. She crouched so we were eye to eye. "You did good," she said to me. "You got out. We've been trying to get into that place for months." "You know about it?" I asked, dizzy with the idea that the nightmare had a file somewhere with its name on it. "Somebody's been talking," she said, glancing at the sedan. Her gaze flicked back to me. "You're Emily?" The name felt like a hand on my shoulder. "Yes." She nodded once, as if that answered a question she had been asking for a long time. "Your father's my informant." The floor tilted. "What?" "He made a deal after he sold you," she said quietly. Words soft, but not kind. "It's not redemption, but it's information." Outside, Daly was in cuffs and shouting names that tasted like rust. The sedan's door opened, and my father stepped out, hat in his hands again. He saw me see him, and his face did 100 things. Collapsed, brightened, hid, begged. I wanted to run to him and away from him at the same time. The piece of metal in my sleeve felt like a verdict. "What do you want me to do?" Sloan asked, eyes steady on mine. It took me a second to understand the question. She wasn't asking if we wanted protection. That was already happening. She was asking something harder. How do you want this told? How do you want this healed? How much of him do you want to keep? "I want the house gone," I said. "I want the girls out. I want the people who took us to forget what freedom tastes like." "And him?" she asked, without looking at my father. "I want him to face what he did." The words surprised me with how steady they were. "But not before he helps us finish this." Sloan nodded like we were partners. "Fair." She stood and walked toward my father. They spoke in low voices I will never know the content of. Words exchanged like contraband. He nodded, gestured, described. Sloan took out a small recorder and let it listen. The van arrived. A woman in a quilted jacket gave Jessa a blanket. The taller girl told me her name, Kara, and asked if it mattered anymore. I told her names matter most when someone tries to take them. Rena leaned into the counter and let herself shake, now that shaking wouldn't betray us. By dawn, the farm had a different kind of visitors. Black SUVs dusted with gravel. Agents who looked like they had slept somewhere in the last 24 hours. Sloan gave orders like she was pointing out exits on a plane, calm and certain. My father stood aside and wrung his hat to pieces. "What's going to happen to him?" I asked. "That depends," Sloan said. "On what's in the office, on that clipboard you noticed, on how much he's willing to put in writing and under oath." "He left me with a paperclip," I said. It felt like saying a joke backward. Sloane's mouth did that thing again, almost a smile. Sometimes the smallest thing opens the biggest door. They brought us to a center with fluorescent lights that tried too hard to be soft. Counselors who spoke in the present tense. You are safe. You have choices. You are here. As if naming safety could make it stick. A doctor took blood gently and said she was sorry without explaining for what because the list was too long. Mara was in the second van, handcuffed, eyes furious and wet. She saw me and flinched like I had thrown something. I stepped toward her before I knew I was moving. "You opened the door," I said. "I closed it once for someone else. I won't be forgiven for either." "You have a son?" I asked, guessing, maybe hoping. She looked at the floor. I had. Past tense. The whole story was full of those. Hale didn't run. Men like him think they live inside rules they made up. He stood in the farmhouse kitchen with his hands folded, as if waiting on toast. He smiled at the agents the way he'd smiled at us, and then he wasn't smiling anymore. They found the corkboard. They found the ledgers. They found the camera feeds and the hard drives and the cash in the freezer. And they found a safe behind the cow calendar that held what Sloan later called the spine. Contracts and wiring instructions and photocopies of IDs. Paper with names on it. The thing that makes the world believe a story.
My father went with them, not in cuffs, not yet. He gave them routes and schedules and the name of the man above Hale, the one who didn't touch anything but money. He told them where the truck stopped for gas and which drivers looked away at the right moment and the wrong one. He talked like he could redeem himself by being exhaustive. When he was done, he sat in a hallway chair and looked at his hands like they were someone else's. I stood in the doorway and let him see me. "I'm sorry," he said. The words were too small. He knew it, I knew it. "You did it," I said. "Then you tried to undo it." My voice broke on the last word. "That's not the same thing." "I know." He nodded, and the nod was somehow the bravest thing he'd ever done. "I know what I am. I also know what I can be useful for. Let me be that. Let me help finish this." It wasn't forgiveness. It was consent to use him as a tool. I gave it with a nod that cost me more than I'll ever fully understand. The raid took hours. They brought out girls who wouldn't make eye contact, women who could hold your gaze and make you look away first, boxes that rattled. Rena and I sat in a room with bad art and waited for someone to say the word past without flinching. When she fell asleep, her mouth finally soft, I watched the doorway for Mara and for monsters and for my father and for some version of me that would be whole again. Weeks spilled into each other like beads. We were placed in safe housing with locks we controlled. I learned to like the sound a deadbolt makes when it answers to your hand. I went to intake meetings and counseling sessions and sat at long tables where people asked questions gently. "What do you need? What can we get you? What would feel like yours?" I told them I wanted a dog. When they laughed kindly, I told him his name was Ghost and he likes beef jerky. I didn't think I'd get him. Then Sloan showed up one afternoon with paperwork and a leash and said, "Turns out he adopts as easily as he betrays." Ghost lay down at my feet and sighed like home. The case moved faster than anyone expected because paper is faster than pain. The safe had names, the names had dates, the dates had money. Hale pled not guilty and then changed his mind. Mara pled guilty and asked the court to let someone read a letter. It was short. It ended with her son's name. My father testified. He didn't make excuses because he had finally learned the difference between a reason and a cause. He looked small in the witness stand. He answered questions in a voice that made my skin remember being 5 and holding his hand in a grocery store. The defense tried to make him a villain so big it would reduce Hale to a bystander. The prosecutor let him be exactly what he was, a man who had done something monstrous and then tried to hold the door open with what was left of him. When it was my turn, I told the truth. Some of it.
not the parts that would live forever in the walls of my skull. I said the words sold and debt and daughter in the same sentence, and nobody fainted, which felt like a miracle. I said paperclip, and the courtroom looked at me like I had said magic. Maybe I had. After, in the hallway, my father waited, hat mangled again, as if he kept trying to turn it back into a thing that would protect him from weather. He took a step toward me and stopped. You don't owe me anything. Not words, not a look, not a visit. I'll do whatever time they say and more, because time is the only thing I ever should have given you and didn't. Ghost leaned against my leg. Rena squeezed my shoulder and went to buy a soda with the coins I'd given her. The machine clanked and apologized. There's one thing. He looked up like a man surfacing. Anything.
When I was little, I said, you told me this story about the day Mom left. You said she took the good plates, and you said, we'll get by with paper. You made it sound like a joke. It wasn't. I swallowed. I want you to tell the truth about that too. In a letter. To me. Not to the court. He nodded, tears doing the embarrassing thing that tears do on men who don't have practice. I can do that, he said. I can do that right. He did. The letter arrived with a stamp, like any other letter. He wrote about debts that weren't money. He wrote about men he admired for all the wrong reasons. He wrote about the first time he called Hale by his first name, and the last time he said mine out loud before the farm. He wrote, I sold you. Full stop. Then he wrote, I will spend what I have left buying you back in ways that count. Not with money. With my life. I didn't write back. Not yet. Some stories don't end. They unfold. Rena found her sister in a different state and now texts me photos of a cat with a perpetually offended face. Jessa draws houses with too many windows and laughs when I call them mansions. Kara started running every morning and says the earth feels different when you're choosing the direction. Mara is in prison and teaching a class on cooking with limited ingredients, which feels like a metaphor I haven't solved yet. Hale will probably die in a place with no view, which is both too much and not enough. Daly is learning what a different kind of badge feels like. Numbers on a chest you don't get to take off. Detective Sloan bought a plant for her office and named it after me because she said it was stubborn and leaned toward the light. She swears she's not sentimental. The plant disagrees. As for me, I started saying my name again in rooms that didn't demand it. I learned that healing sounds like ordinary things. Grocery lists. We need milk. Your turn with the trash. Ghost, drop it. Sometimes I wake at 1:17 a.m. and listen for the generator's stutter and hear only the small, living noises of a house that belongs to me. I tell this story because people like to believe monsters arrive from the outside. Sometimes they do, but sometimes they are the person who knows your middle name. That doesn't make you less. It doesn't make you dirty. It makes you a witness who survived. My father sold me to pay his debts, but then the door opened, and I learned that the smallest piece of metal can become a key if you teach it how. I learned that informants can be fathers and still be guilty. I learned that a dog can save your life simply by wanting to be near it. I learned that on the other side of a door, there are women like Mara who make the wrong choice and then the right one. And there are detectives like Sloan who show up at gas stations and turn the night into morning with their voices. If you're hearing me and you're still inside, count with me. 60, 59. 58. There will be a stutter. It won't be mercy. It will be timing. But you can use it. You can make it mercy. And when you get outside, run toward the first place with witnesses and light. Tell the clerk your real name. Keep telling it until it sticks. The night I escaped, I thought freedom would feel like a movie. Music swelling, credits rolling. It felt like cold air and wet socks and a mutt's warm breath on my hand, and a woman saying, "You're safe," in a voice that believed itself.
It felt small. It felt huge. It felt like something I would have to practice. I practice every day. Sometimes I go back to the service road and stand where the sign used to be. The gas station changed owners and the coffee is better now, which feels rude to the past. The clerk who called for us moved away. The new one doesn't know the story, which is also a kind of healing. He sells me jerky for Ghost and tells me about his sister's car trouble. I listen like it's the most important news in the world. Maybe it is. Ordinary is the empire I'm building now. Sloane asked me once if I wanted to join her at a talk for first responders. How to read a gas station scene, what to look for in a quiet girl with great clothes and two wide eyes. I went. I said the pizza call is a myth in most places, but a coded phrase can still work if the right person hears it. I told them to notice the shoes that don't fit the season, shoes with mud from places that aren't nearby. I told them to look for girls who watch doors like they're waiting on a weather report. After, a paramedic hugged me so hard, it wiped out a bad week.
Sometimes in the back row, I see a girl with a crescent scar above her eyebrow. It's not Rena. She's across 2 state lines, but it doesn't have to be. I see the flinch become a straightening. I see a hand unclench. I see someone adding a bent piece of metal to their pocket and hoping it becomes a key. I still dream about my father walking into the farmhouse, hat in his hands. In the dream, he always says the wrong name first. The waking part of me is cruel enough to be glad he never gets it right, even in dreams. The younger part of me tells him the name anyway, because she always loved teaching him things. I let both parts exist. They are the truth. On the day the verdicts came, the courtroom felt packed with ghosts, the versions of me that didn't make it, the girls who never left, the women who left and never said it out loud. The judge spoke, and the numbers had that hollow feeling numbers get when they try to measure a thing they can't contain. 20 years. 12. 7. Consecutive. The words stacked up. The air didn't change. It took time to feel the weight. Afterward, Sloane bought donuts and pretended it was for her team, then ate 2 and licked sugar off her thumb like a kid. "I'm supposed to tell you about resources," she said around a mouthful, "but I think you have resource problem like I have a donut problem, which is to say, abundance." "What if I don't stay okay?" I asked. I don't know why it came out there, with powdered sugar between us, but it did. "You won't," she said. "Not all the time. That's not the contract. The contract says you get to not be okay without being unsafe." She handed me a napkin. "When you wobble, we'll be here, and when we wobble, you'll buy me coffee and I'll pretend it evens out." I laughed, and the sound made something inside me rearrange itself in a better way. The letter from my father sits in a drawer I open when I want to remember that a full stop can be its own paragraph. Sometimes I take it out and read the line about time. It makes me angry every single time. It also makes me breathe deeper. Both feel like steps. Ghost has learned 3 tricks: sit, stay, and recognize bad men in nice shirts. He's better at the last one than I am. He growls from his chest like a tiny drum roll, and I put a hand on his head and say, "We're okay," until we are. On the 1-year mark, Rena and I drove past the farmhouse, or what used to be the farmhouse. The land is bare now, the building taken down to the last nail, the last lie. Wildflowers are trying their best. "Do you want to plant something?" Rena asked, half joking. "Yes," I said, and surprised us both. We stopped at a garden center and bought seeds with names that sounded brave: coneflower, Black-eyed Susan, bee balm. We planted them where the mudroom used to be, near the ghost of the generator shed, along the path where a dog once learned to be quiet long enough to save us. It felt stupid and holy. A bee landed on Rena's knuckle and stayed as if listening. A truck rattled by on the service road, and the driver honked, not at us, just at the morning, and the sound didn't make me flinch. That's when I knew a new year had actually started. If you're waiting for forgiveness in this story, here it is. I forgave myself for not running sooner, because there is no sooner when you don't have a door. I forgave the girl who kept her eyes down, because sometimes looking up would have gotten her hurt faster. I haven't forgiven my father. I don't know if I will. That's not a cliffhanger. It's a boundary. What I did do was change my last name back to the one my mother kept after she left. It's 3 letters shorter and feels like a shirt that fits right out of the dryer. It feels like a thing I chose. People ask me what the title of my story is. I tell them the truth, the version that makes my mouth dry and my hands steady. My father sold me to pay his debts, until I learned to count what he couldn't, and then I escaped. If you're counting right now, keep going. The stutter will come. The door will open. I'm not promising a miracle. I'm offering a method. It's small, and it works, and you can carry it in your sleeve. When it does, I'll meet you at the gas station. I'll be the one with the dog and the coffee. I'll say your name until it belongs to you again. Then we'll drive the long way home, past the field where the grass finally decided to grow.